Welcome to Sanity, a podcast by the New York Sun. My name is A.R. Hoffman, and every week, along with my co-host, Rebecca Sugar, we try to make sense out of the nonsense and bring just a little bit of sanity to your week. Speaking of insane, our background today, we're in another studio,
in this room.
And it's sort of like, prolonged, like staring at this background is sure to drive you
Ari
insane.
Redecorated, I just want to say.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, the quote of the week, Ari, is from the Secretary of the Department of War, Pete Hegseth, who addressed...
Look at how that rolled off your tongue. Secretary of War,
love it.
up with the current lingo.
Who addressed military leadership at Quantico. Talk about insane. Remember when he announced that he was drawing all those people back from wherever they were, and everybody thought we were going to war or something terrible was going to happen. Turns out he just wanted to give a speech and tell them what the new Secretary of War stood for, which is what the old Secretary of War used to stand for. And he said, enforcing high standards, not toxic leadership. Leading warfighters toward the goals of high gender-neutral and uncompromising standards in order to form a cohesive, formidable, and lethal Department of War is not toxic. It is our duty consistent with our constitutional oath. So, right, no more beardos, he said, no fat generals, and no dudes in dresses. Those were my big takeaways. But really, the larger point was that standards matter. And DEI is done in the military, and people are going to have to rise to the high standards that we set for our active military members, and at all levels, from the top brass all the way down to the average soldier. And I think that we're making standards great again in America.
Yeah, I hear. If I were a general in South Korea, I don't know if I slept 20 hours to, but to
get fat shamed?
To get fat shamed. You also had a vintage Trump speech.
Yes.
Okay, so we're, as always, we're recording, actually today we're a little bit on a different schedule because of Yom Kippur, Thursday. So we're talking to you on Wednesday, whenever you're listening.
So everything could change.
Forgive us if there's breaking news. It's still worth listening to us, but we'll try our best to predict what could happen. We have a bunch of top stories today. We're now into the shutdown, Rebecca. We're also into the kind of world of the new Gaza 20-point plan, sort of the countdown to Hamas's, answer. And we have a big news on the prescription drug front. So we'll talk about all of those things. We're also going to dive into a kind of debate, scrum, controversy online around, podcasters talking about podcasters, but about Megyn Kelly and some of the voices, influential voices on the right. And we'll also catch you up on what's Eric Adams's next moves and a bunch of other things as well. So, Rebecca, let's start, I think, with the shutdown. Mm-hmm. This is not the first rodeo for any of us with a government shutdown. It's one of those quirks of our democracy that feels like, we always do this. We always go to the brink. Somehow things always continue as usual. It's always a game of chicken. Both sides seem uninclined to agree, disinclined. Last time, Schumer kind of caved and caught a lot of heat from Democrats for doing so. So I don't know. I find this stuff kind of like theater of the absurd. But
do you care that the government shut down?
It is what it is.
Does it?
Well, that's always the question. What does it mean? For it feels to me more almost like a symbolic thing, or a feature of our dysfunctional politics. But ideally, it wouldn't, right?
It hasn't changed my day yet. But I guess if I were a government employee, I would. Yeah. I think it's sort of interesting that the shutdown sort of centers around the Democrats' desire to put more money into healthcare, particularly some Republicans say, or all the Republicans are saying, for illegal immigrants. And it sort of came on the heels of Trump's announcement, which we're going to talk about later, about reduction in drug costs. So Trump sort of beat them to the punch on this sort of healthcare cost-saving narrative before they could shut the government down on that exact subject, which I thought was sort of interesting. But generally, I think most people already have a team, and their team is blaming the other team, and so nobody's persuaded that the Republicans shut it down, the Democrats shut it down. Everybody who sort of has a view already has their view. I don't know that anybody's winning this battle, and it's likely, right, that Schumer will have to cave again, and the Democrats will have to cave again.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't seem like there's any other way out of this. So, yeah, theater of the absurd, as you said.
Yeah. I mean, I think, being a minority party, one of the things you can do is kind of gum up the works. So that's sort of what they're doing. I think that a lot of voices on the left are, calling for a more obstructionist approach. I don't know if that's effective. The question always with shutdown is like, who gets the blame? Right. And like you said, Trump's approval ratings just came out, the latest numbers, I think yesterday, and they're remarkably steady. Mm-hmm. I think it goes to your point that, they're not super high, but, most of the people who voted for him are happy with him. The people who didn't hate him, and that's sort of where things are.
And also he has a moment here, right? And he alluded to this a little bit. There's a lot of wiggle room for a president during a shutdown to do a lot of things. And I think I read that Charlie Kirk, the late Charlie Kirk now, in one of his tweets had put out some suggestions for what Republicans could do in such an event. And they include things like abolishing the IRS or firing, federal employees that, are sort of there for no reason. And a lot of things that Trump can do that are permanent changes that the Democrats don't like. So with no resistance, I mean, he's free to do it now that the government's shut down. So what a, bad move for the Democrats. Yet again, I think Senator Kennedy said, right, everyone can do whatever they want, but sometimes what they do is just plain stupid. He said it better than that. But
on the other hand, Trump is the president, and so if any negative effects do start being felt, he's ultimately responsible for it. So this is all part of the sort of calculation and the game. You remember Democrats already lost on, in one way on the big, beautiful bill, right? That's sort of a lot of Trump's priorities were encoded in that. On the other hand, the polling on that is deeply underwater for the president. He's even thinking about changing the name of it. So we live at a time, I think, where a lot of the action now is just at the White House, and I think this is just going to further the impression that Congress is a kind of useless exercise. Yes. Right? I mean, this doesn't, make Congress feel more important. It makes it feel like, they're just kind of screwing up again. Yeah. You mentioned the Pfizer deal. Now that's a deal with Pfizer. Albert Bourla, the CEO, was in the Oval Office to create lower prices for Medicaid through a kind of, dare I say, a kind of Obama-style exchange, online exchange called Trump Exchange or something like this. Obviously prescription drugs is a potent issue. It's an issue that cuts across the aisle. Everyone, whether you need drugs or get sick doesn't depend on whether you're conservative or liberal. So I think it's a winning issue for the president, and also has been a priority for people on the left, like Bernie Sanders. So I agree that it's, I think, an effective move. And just to clarify how this happened was through the tariff mechanism and sort of the lifting of tariffs. And I think a lot of us thought that ultimately tariffs would be used as a kind of political carrot and stick tool, and this is one example where Trump used them that way.
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it was interesting to note that the commitment by Pfizer was to cut costs on drugs to Medicaid, but not Medicare. And that's meaningful because they actually do much more business with Medicare. Sure. But the bigger point, as they were standing there with RFK in the background, and RFK praising Albert Bourla, the CEO of Pfizer, and Trump thanking him for his brilliant work during COVID, a large, section of this country let out a primal scream. And, the CEO of Pfizer, according to many people, according to Dr. Naomi Wolf, who wrote the Pfizer papers and didn't deep dive into what happened during the COVID years, a lot of people view him as guilty of, I don't know if I want to say crimes, but A lot of people would.
Yeah, I mean, there's a kind of like schizophrenia here, right? Because of course, Operation Warp Speed was touted as one of the great achievements in the history of presidential politics. So I think there's a way in which Trump wants to have it both ways, where he's saying like that was one of the great things my administration did. Yeah. On the other hand, he has the RFK thing. So yeah, there's a kind of divide.
But it's a big thing. It's a big thing. Pfizer, papers indicate that they knew that there were negative implications of the mRNA shots for pregnant women, and a lot of this has come out, and there he stands with Kennedy behind him and Trump next to him. And the message, however you feel about what happened during COVID-19, you do know from this announcement yesterday that there will be no accountability for Pfizer for anything that they did or didn't do. We're never going to fully have an accounting of that under this administration. And I think I know a lot of people are deeply disappointed in that. You could make the argument that the good that will come out of this sort of, détente between RFK and Burla will be worth the trade. But I think a lot of people are deeply unhappy about this, and President Trump's going to have to navigate that with his own base. This wasn't just a win because prices are going to go down.
Yeah, but people need these drugs. I mean, so, I think the politics of all this stuff is super interesting. I agree with you.
Would have been interesting to start somebody other than Pfizer, a different company, maybe. I mean, that's just
Moderna?
like a trigger word. I don't know who else is out there.
AstraZeneca?
Novo Nordisk? There's nobody.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Pfizer just feels like this like the symbol of all that enraged the Maha, sort of universe. And this shouldn't be ignored that they are not happy about this announcement.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Medicaid issue is interesting. I mean, a large part of the Big Beautiful Bill was attempting to like claw back Medicaid, and so right. I mean, if you're a senior, you're not necessarily benefiting from this, right? And so, maybe the impact is less. The other thinking is, as with any deal, is from Pfizer's point of view, one, tariffs were going to be 100% on prescription drugs. So, okay, that's a kind of like, a cudgel. And the other is the feeling that this is actually a good deal for Pfizer because the price controls were going to be even more draconian, maybe including Medicare or just in general. So, it seems like I was interested in your comment, Rebecca. I think you're right to say that the timing of this, when so much of the shutdown debate is about healthcare costs, is really interesting.
Right. You wonder if they had this deal cooked up a week ago, but Trump wisely said, let's just wait until the Democrats, go over the cliff.
Yeah. Okay. And then, this has been obviously a huge story. We've covered it at The Sun extensively, and the Gaza Plan. And I have to say, I'm really impressed. We talked, I think, last week, and, Prime Minister Netanyahu was speaking to an empty United Nations. Israel was isolated. It had been a kind of beat up Israel week at the UN. We covered that on this program. And then things look very different now. Now Israel has said yes, and so has the Arab world. And that's a remarkable turnaround. I think, for a deal that, is it perfect from Israel's point of view on everything? Not at all, but it puts Israel in a really strong position, I think.
Yeah.
I give the president credit, and I give Jared Kushner credit and Witkoff and all of that. I think the buy-in from the Arab world is something, that is really strong. Of course, the Europeans are struggling along and taking credit too. That's fine. But, so I think I'm feeling better this week than I was last week. Of course, the question, and you might know this by the time you're listening to this, is will Hamas say yes?
Right. I mean, look, amazing what a strike in Doha can do to get the Qataris to finally say enough with this Hamas thing. I mean, they are their major sponsors, or Iran.
Well, we have to say
Qatar.
that, the news is just coming over this morning that Trump has promised Qatar a kind of protection agreement, basically like a NATO agreement.
Yes.
It's not a treaty, but it's an executive letter, a promise.
Right.
So, everyone's getting something out of it, for sure.
And all the other Arab countries probably looked at that strike in Doha and said to themselves, oh, I mean, the Israelis are actually going to go there. Well, now we're a little bit nervous. Maybe this, funding of Hamas and terrorists to kill Israelis isn't really working out to our benefit in the end. Maybe we should come to the table. So it is sort of remarkable that you have like Turkey and Qatar and all
Pakistan,
these Pakistan. They don't even recognize Israel.
Right,
coming together on
and
this.
that's what's so exciting about this is it's not just a kind of partial deal. Okay, we'll trade some prisoners, we'll get some hostages, we'll withdraw. You're beginning to see possibly a new architecture of the whole region.
Yeah.
I mean, not to get too ahead of myself, but
right.
That's I think the real promise of this.
And again, like you said, we're a couple of days ahead of when people are going to hear this, so it might all change. But I personally don't know a single person who believes that Hamas is going to say yes to this, just because historically, and in terms of what is in it for them, why not go down fighting then? Because at the end of the day, if they say yes, they're done, they give up the hostages, they have no leverage, why wouldn't Israel just, eradicate them? And if they say no, at least they go down fighting, and maybe they get the pleasure of killing a few more Israelis along the way, which is a joy for them. So I don't know.
Well, one question is, it's not just about saying yes or no. It's can they deliver the hostages, right?
Right. Will they say, as they've said, oops, we don't know where they are.
Yeah.
Right?
So there's a lot of unknowns there. I mean, if they say, well, there are 48 hostages alive and dead. If they say, well, we can only deliver 14, what happens?
Right.
It's not really clear.
Right. And look, most of what's written in this plan is, of course, not clear. I mean, how could it be? It's not long enough to be clear. But I mean, I wrote down some section about technocratic, apolitical Palestinian committee that would be the transitional government with this board of peace overseeing it with, of all people, Tony Blair. I mean, oh my God.
It could be worse.
It's like everybody who's failed for the last few decades to create peace in the Middle East would be on this board overseeing some technocratic group of Palestinians.
Yeah.
I don't even know what all of that means, but I don't think we're going to actually get to the point of finding out, fortunately or unfortunately, I guess, depending on how you view it. But we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I think the basic, position that Hamas, can exist as a governing entity has now been bought into by the world. And I think any governance of Gaza that doesn't include Hamas is just much less of a threat to Israel, And, I think, was this deal available earlier? Who knows? But I think the pressure, the Israeli military pressure, the strike on Qatar, and you got to give Bibi credit. I mean, he gets a ton of flack from the right and from the left. Being the prime minister of Israel is maybe the most difficult job in the world.
The worst job.
And, and he, has arrived at a place, I think, where he can effectively say that we've defeated Hamas militarily and now have secured a diplomatic kind of victory as well.
Yeah. I just wonder about that part about Hamas. How do you, they get to decommission their own weapons. How do you know that they've all surrendered or left the country? Or how do you give amnesty to somebody who kept a hostage and starved them in a tunnel for 2 years? All of it just seems so hard to believe that it could happen.
And as part of this, Israel has to give back hundreds of people who are serving sentence for murder. So there's a real, obviously a real cost to this. But I think the idea that that terrorists controlling territory is like a particular danger, and that Israel is done with that, and having that.
Be curious
on its
to see what Macron and Starmer and all these people who are in a rush to declare a Palestinian state are going to say if Hamas rejects this deal, and if Israel has to go in and finish the job in Gaza City. Let's see. What tone they take then. They're kind of in a weird place right now. If Hamas says no, and I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, I think they're claiming, but even they are behind this plan, right? I mean, so I think there's, Israel has gone from being incredibly diplomatically isolated, I think, to now being, in the driver's seat. It's the power of strategically saying yes, I think. But
do you think those people will then support Israel if Hamas says no and Israel has said yes? And then Israel has to go in and finish the job.
The first missile, the first rocket.
Right, so it's talking about short-lived.
Yeah. But, this is very much a possibility. I mean, the latest we're hearing this morning is that, the IDF has encircled Gaza City, like they're ready to go. But I think you can't overestimate in Israel and abroad, the emotional weight of the hostages. And I think that, if Bibi can have a deal to bring them back while still being able to claim in some fashion victory over Hamas, I think there's enormous pressure to do that. Okay. Lots of weighty and unfolding stories. Our Make It Make Sense section this week is sort of, I think, well, it's about Megyn Kelly, but more than just Megyn Kelly. It's about, I think, this whole ecosystem of the right around these, enormous media personalities and successful media personalities, just to kind of catch people up. There's a lot of details, but at a high level, Megyn Kelly basically was criticized for, what was it, having Tucker on, or was it?
There are a couple of different criticisms, right? There's what she herself said about Israel and Charlie Kirk's views on Israel. And then there's what she didn't say or won't say in response to the things that Tucker Carlson is saying and Candace Owens is saying.
Right.
And she is going on tour, and Tucker Carlson's going to appear with her, I think, in one or two of the tour locations. So she's getting a lot of flack for both. And it's so detailed and hard to pick apart. But the part about what she said, I kind of dismiss, because actually she's been, we should say, a very strong pro-Israel voice for a very long time, unequivocal in her support of Israel before and after October 7th. And so that she even got any flack for saying things like, she said that she noted a poll that indicated that American support for Israel under the age 30 bracket is plummeted. And people like Mark Levin, excoriated her for that and called her all kinds of names. She talked about wrapping up the Gaza war already and that we're losing moral authority, Israel is. And so people were calling her literally an anti-Semite, and that was
an opinion you hear in Israel all the time, by the way.
I just not an anti-Semitic opinion by any stretch of the imagination. And so to attack her like that, and I think most interestingly, she just talked about Jeffrey Epstein and how, it's possible that he was working for Mossad, maybe the CIA, maybe MI5. She didn't say he was an agent of Mossad. She didn't say Mossad is out there trying to penetrate the highest echelons of American society and bring everyone down. She just sort of batted it around, as I have at dinner tables, because I don't know, maybe the Mossad was leveraging some good info. Who knows? And for that, she was called an anti-Semite. So I think just in that lane of what she said, I don't see anything that she said that even smacks of anti-Semitism or anti-Israel. And I think it's insane to attack someone who's been a steady friend all these years at that level. It was just remarkable.
Yeah, I do think I agreed. I think, though, to go to another bucket, was this post on X where she basically said that Tucker is a friend of mine. Candace is getting criticism for anyone, and I only care about the lefts, the kind of sins of the left, basically.
Right.
I just think that's wrong. I think it's a wrong position. I think Carlson and Owens are both rabid anti-Semites that are using huge platforms to propagate that. I think the question of moral courage is, are you willing to call out the cranks on your own side? I mean, anyone can say, the person on the other side is bad. Now, I'm not sort of saying that she shouldn't be friends with them, but but endorsing and appearing and all that, I think, for a lot of Jews who have held her up as a real beacon, and an ally, I think there's some tough questions to ask, especially as that strand of the right is really growing and it's really gaining influence. I mean, Tucker Carlson spoke, and we have an editorial about this, and like shared basically like a blood libel at Charlie Kirk's funeral. I mean, watch Candace Owens. I mean, it's off the wall.
Right. So
where does it stop? Where is someone willing to say, no mas here? This is not the kind of right we want.
Right. Yeah, I get that. I guess I just would, I can't argue with what you just said, but I would just add to it to say a couple of questions that I had, though, are, A, why is she responsible for condemning things that other people said? That feels like a very woke tactic to me. Like, I remember during the BLM years when I didn't post a black square and people thought,
she's having Tucker
not
on,
only
her,
are
on,
you,
her, on her tour.
Right, no, I get that. That's another level. But just the initial piece was, why aren't you condemning these people? And I feel like, is that everybody's job all the time? Do we have to condemn every bad person? And if we don't, we therefore are supporting them? Like, at some level, that just felt a little much to me.
Kind of silence is violence.
Yeah, it's a little wokey for my taste. And bringing him on tour, I get, is a lot. And it took me a while, but I came to the conclusion that Tucker is mad on the subject of Israel. But then I wonder, like, if we just think of this in terms of what's the principle, not in this particular case, but you always want to pull back and say, well, what principle are we trying to advance here? And are we saying that there are certain topics where if you hold a certain view on them, that you're beyond the pale? And then what are they and how are you defining those topics? In this case, yes, Candace Owens is crazy and she says things that aren't true. And then when she's caught saying things that aren't true, she doubles down on them. And okay, so that we all can see is plainly beyond the pale. If there were a Republican, I don't know, person that we wanted to invite on this show to talk about H-1B visas, and that was the topic, but we also happened to know that they were very much against gay marriage. They just felt that gay marriage should be abolished. It's wrong. It's immoral. Are we allowed to have that person
Clarence
on the show
Thomas.
and give them a platform?
Yeah.
So how do you decide?
These are hard questions.
For us, it's so personal because it's Israel, but maybe for Megyn Kelly, it's just like, that's just one thing that Tucker says, but on 98% of things they agree.
I don't think I would want to engage with them. I don't think we'd have Nick Fuentes on the show. I mean, he's an anti-Semite. I don't.
But what other than anti-Semitism would trigger that for us or for anybody? And what is the what are the rules?
I wouldn't have David Duke. I mean, I don't. I think the question is, like, one is, should there be rules at all? And if you say that there should be some lines, then I worry that this is just like Megyn Kelly is trying to capture some of their audience. Like, they're just both wildly successful.
People
Tucker's the top
that.
podcast. Candace is 3. Even Nick Fuentes has a big audience. So I think there's this kind of like emerging I see it on my X feed all the time. Like, these crazy right-wing, like, real anti-Semite, real, like, and I don't know.
But she has said, to be fair, so many times I've heard her say explicitly, let's say, to the insinuation that Charlie Kirk was killed by Israel, which is something that Tucker Carlson insinuated and Candace Owens basically said out loud. Megyn Kelly has said that's insane. There is no evidence to support that. I don't believe that. So she's not agreeing with their views on Israel.
Right.
Is it okay to agree with somebody on 90% of things that you talk about together, and then on the 10%, if it's brought up, you say, well, I don't agree with that. And then are you still an anti-Semite? Are you still betraying people who put their faith in you? Is there some responsibility that she has to only align herself with people who fit into categories that we've delineated in advance, and what are they and who's deciding?
I think as a major voice with a major platform, you have to think about, what are you amplifying? What are you not amplifying? I just think it's this idea of, like, I only criticize the left. I mean, that is like such a, and I like Megyn, and I like know her personally a little bit. Like, I love you, Megyn, but like, I think that to me is just a very narrow understanding. Like, no, the whole point is, any worldview that worth its salt is gonna call it honestly.
Yeah, no, that's right. I sort of got the sense
that's a leftist perspective.
Yes,
is we only criticize the right.
But
don't you
feel like she just posted that, like, in the heat of the moment in response to the onslaught that's come at her? I'm not sure she really believes that, and it was the wrong thing to say and the wrong thing to do if she does believe it. But I didn't get the sense that was like some heartfelt philosophy that she was putting forward. She has been. In my feed, it almost feels like a coordinated pile-on against her, all using the same kind of language. Maybe she just got fed up and said, okay, bug off. And like,
and everyone's entitled to that. I just think that, people will, people are going to start to have to figure out, what to do with this group that includes Carlson, Owens, and others, and they're enormously powerful. I haven't seen enough. Honestly, I haven't seen enough pushback. You
Yeah.
know, why is Tucker Carlson on that stage? There's no pushback, and the left has come under a lot of criticism for allowing the crazies into the tent, and the crazies are just as in the right tent, and nobody is.
I totally agree. We have crazies on the right
Yeah.
for sure, and they should be called out where they're crazy. My only point here is that there are probably 10 topics I can come up with where you could identify crazies on the right, and we don't seem concerned with all of those crazies. This is the issue that galvanizes all this emotion and attention, and we don't have rules of the road. So people who experience it, like Megyn Kelly, experience it like, why is the pro-Israel community like attacking me for this issue? But they're not focused on I don't know, there were people on the right who were, supporting the BLM movement. Like, remember Mitt Romney on his knee and sort of begging for forgiveness and stuff. And like, that's kind of crazy. And there wasn't sort of like this kick him out of the party kind of stuff. It's like, what are the issues that are defined in the right as the threat and the danger? And are we identifying enough of them? Or are we just only seeing it in one lane? And then almost creating this sort of resistance among people like Megyn Kelly, who's, a smart businesswoman and doesn't want to be told what to say and what not to say.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think it worries me that we just keep focusing on this issue and trying to extract from people language that we like and we want and making those demands. It could start to feel, if I were on the other side, like a lot of pressure and a lot of unfair pressure and a lot of arrogance. Like, who are you to tell me? And it escalates and it gets to this point.
I just think Tucker, you could say, if you make a list of the 5 most powerful Republicans in America, I think there's an argument that Tucker Carlson is on that list, and his attitudes towards Israel are really like protocols of Elders of Zion. And that to me is a huge problem. And I don't think you could find it as influential as anyone on the left who has that kind of platform, who is indulging the kind of conspiracy theories that Tucker Carlson.
You can't on the left. The entire DSA is
of course, but
radically
I'm
anti.
just saying, Tucker Carlson is at the very summit of Republican politics.
Yeah.
I mean, by all means, it doesn't have to be just this issue. Like, kick Tucker out for his crazy Russia stuff. I mean, I just think he's just I think courage is saying hard things to your friends, not to your enemies.
Right. Okay, well, maybe we'll leave it there and say maybe a lot of this should have happened not online. If they were really her friends and really wanted to correct her behavior, they could have talked to her privately. They didn't have to embarrass her in public and escalate this to some public war and make it maybe more than it needed to be. But we are here now, and I'd rather it de-escalate because she's a friend, and we need friends, and this is not the way to treat friends on either side.
She's a big girl.
She's a big girl. I'm not defending Megyn Kelly.
Okay, let's hit our sunlight.
Yeah.
I'll just do a quick one because already this is from a few days ago, but the stepping aside of Eric Adams. I've spoken about Adams on this program before. I don't think he'll be super missed. But the question now is what happens. We've seen some papers calling on Sliwa to get out of the race. Doesn't seem like he's willing to do that. I think it's an interesting question of like, should he be asked to do that? Is that fair? Trump seems to even be kind of like saying, he's a weirdo with lots of cats. Like, what's he doing?
Cats are a tell that you're
the
weird.
Cats are kind of weird. So it's heating up in the mayor's race. I think one of the issues was Adams was so unpopular that it's not really clear his leaving the race makes any difference. You know what I mean? Like, it's sad. It's sad but true.
Right.
If a tree falls in the forest kind of thing.
I'm gonna miss the way he said New York is.
I mean, his lines are amazing, and you've said this from the beginning, Rebecca, that and Cuomo is just and the idea of going towards Cuomo. So we'll see.
Do you think people are going to go towards Cuomo?
He's just he just doesn't have the juice, He's just but I really, not to sound like a broken record, but Mamdani and we'll have more coverage of this coming out in the next couple weeks. Is just. He's really terrible. He's really terrible.
Megyn Kelly should definitely not do a tour with Zohran Mamdani.
No,
we can agree on that.
No, I agree. Megyn Kelly should be our mayor. Okay, your turn.
My sunlight is, I just want to bring attention to everyone out there that we had something in Dearborn, Michigan in the beginning of September called ArabCon, the Arab American Convention. And it featured great luminaries of the Arab American world like Linda Sarsour of Women's March fame and Tony Aguilar, who famously lied about a dead Gazan boy and blamed the GHF, the Gaza Humanitarian Fund. Mahmoud Khalil soon won't be with us, I think. So, I'm not here necessarily to critique all the content, and I didn't, only certain parts of it were streamed online that I watched. I wouldn't say that it was must-see TV, but I would say that what struck me is that for an Arab American convention, there was almost nothing that they said about Arab Americans. It was almost entirely about Gaza, Palestinians, and Zionists and Israel, which is to say that the Arab American community couldn't come up with 2 or 3 days of speakers to talk about the positive developments here in the United States or medical breakthroughs that their leaders have advanced. And it was a victim fest, rage fest kind of, we're here to oppose the other side, whatever they designate the other side as. And sadly, I had this really dark moment where I watched it and I thought, if I close my eyes and just replaced a lot of, not the hate and not the sort of vitriol, but the agenda, the template of we are gathered here today to identify ourselves as, fighting this other thing, I could have put a lot of the American Jewish events that I've been to lately in there, and identifying, creating an identity, anything that's a hyphenated American, creating an identity for yourself that is entirely based on victimhood and anger and grievance is not a good look, and it's not a good way to gain adherence. The next generation and the one after that, you have to talk about what you're here for and what to do, not just what you're against. And giving free advice to the Arab American, whatever committee or convention, this is not the way forward if you want a way forward.
Yeah, and that's always been a kind of blight on the kind of Palestinian cause is it more interested in destruction than construction, or more interested in driving the Jews into the sea than building something on the land. Mine is sort of related, and that is the utter silence from the ceasefire crowd after the Trump proposal. It's remarkable, actually. This cacophony, ceasefire now, forget release hostages. That was never part of the equation, but from the kind of anti-Israel mob, amoeba blob. And now that there is a path for the end of the war, it's crickets. And instead you're seeing people saying only Palestinians should decide the future of Palestine. And it's like, well, yeah, Palestinians did vote for Hamas in 2005, and they set the course for what the future holds. So, it just reinforces this idea that it never really is about the Palestinians. It's about, the Jews, and it's about antagonism to the state of Israel. So, if you want a ceasefire, call up your local Hamas representative and tell them to hand in their weapons, because that's what it's going to be. And the good news for Israel and the bad news for all the haters is that Israel is now part of the solution, and Hamas, as it always was, is the problem.
Yeah, great.
Thanks, Rebecca.
Can I do my sunburn?
Oh yeah, of course, of course.
My sunburn is the UK and Europe, and I'm just do a really quick, let me take 1 minute of your time and just tell you how bad the UK and
time
the EU
out.
are.
Let me just say, for all our listeners, we can announce that we are going to have an event with none other than former UK Prime Minister Liz Truss on October 19th here in New York. So put that on your calendars.
Definitely come out. I'll read this list to her too. Maybe
please.
She can take responsibility for some of it.
She was only Prime Minister
for a month.
It might have been a busy
month.
responsibility for half a point. Yeah.
Okay, the National Health Services in the UK announced that first cousin marriages have benefits.
Yeah, that was amazing.
Right? That was a joy to hear. Of course, they said that because the majority of people residing in the UK who marry their first cousins happen to be of Pakistani descent, and they love
Either
a
you're
good
a Rothschild or you're a Pakistani descent.
Terrible. Terrible. Literally, it produces all kinds of medical problems for kids, and it's disgraceful. But to kowtow, to the political correctness by actually bending the science to say that there are benefits and be the National Health Service. That's how low they've fallen. Keir Starmer of the UK announced that there would be a digital ID. And we're going to talk more about this because it's only growing. Other countries are adopting it and have already adopted it, like China, for instance. And Keir Starmer said that it's mandatory for the right to work in the UK, pretending, as they always do, that this new technology will be for your benefit, the British citizen, because they're going to use it to stop illegal immigrants from working in the UK and save those precious British citizens' jobs. But of course, it has nothing to do with that and everything to do with controlling the British citizenry, and there's been a huge petition to counter it. Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the EU, announced also this week that there'd be an EU democracy shield, which would be like a ministry of truth of the sort that we tried to have here under the Biden administration and rejected. And they would combat mis and disinformation, the two most overused words in the English language. They also said that there'd be an EU biometric digital record for visitors to the EU starting October 12th. So your data, if you're a visitor to the EU, will be stored for 3 years by God knows who and used for who knows what. And of course, the EU announced, and it's been announcing, but they're ramping up now for a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, which they're going to roll out in October, which is, of course, a programmable and surveillable currency that the central government can then use for all sorts of wonderful things, like debanking you if they don't like your politics, or if they oppose your carbon footprint, maybe shutting your car down so you can't drive it, or denying you access to health services if you refuse all the vaccines that they tell you must take. So this whole basket of things together goes into the basket that we've been talking about for so long now, which is, Western Europe and the United States are two very different places in today's world. We're two different cultures. We may have a shared history, but I see little that we have in common anymore. We just don't believe in the basic fundamental rights of the average individual citizen in the same way. And I just, like, all the times I wished I had been born in Rome or France, I am so grateful even more than ever now to be living here, even in New York, even with the prospect of Zohran Mamdani ruling us. This is a better country by a mile than any country I can identify in the EU and certainly the UK.
Okay. God bless America. Rebecca, thank you. We'll talk to you next week.
Cue the music.